I'm going to die soon. That thought pulsed through my head like a frantic heartbeat, echoing the rhythm of my struggling heart. It could barely pump the thick blood through my body, exhausted by heat and wounds. Well, there was only one wound, but what a wound it was. Instead of my right arm, a pathetic stump jutted from my shoulder joint, wrapped in a dirty rag darkened with blood. The fabric had crusted over from the heat and stuck to the stump, so with each careless movement, my shoulder exploded with pain. My end was approaching, final and irreversible. All around me, nothing but scorching orange desert, and I'd never make it to the flat-topped rocks visible on the horizon. Water had long since left my body, my burning skin had tightened into scabs, and my blistered feet were on fire. This sand would be perfect for making Turkish coffee, not for walking in wooden sandals on bare feet. Right now, I'd settle for those proverbial skis if it meant I could stop roasting my feet in their own juices. Christ, what's the temperature here? 50, 60, or a full 100? Any liquid that falls to the ground instantly evaporates with an angry hiss, as if hitting a griddle. No wonder nothing grows here, not even the scrawniest cactus or saxaul bush. Nothing but goddamn sand everywhere you look. Shade. That's what I needed most. But where could I find shelter in this endless sea of sand and dust? The gentle dunes, like frozen waves, were too low to provide any protection from the merciless sun. No, this day would definitely be my last. Trying to take another gasping breath, I suddenly realized I couldn't. That's it. The goldfish's gills had stuck together. An invisible hand squeezed my parched throat, depriving me of air, hot as it was. My cotton-like legs buckled, and I collapsed heavily into the embrace of the orange dune. It accepted me like family and began carefully covering me with fresh sand. Very soon there would be no trace of me left, and the insatiable desert would claim another victim. It had been waiting long enough already. So that's it? I'm done for? The awareness of approaching death shot through my spine like electricity, making my exhausted body arch. As if stung, I lunged up from the enveloping sand, then crashed down hard onto a solid surface. What? Where am I? Beneath me, I felt an ordinary carpet that had somewhat softened my inglorious fall. From a bed, apparently. It was right there, just inches from my face. My arm, my dear limb, to my immense relief, was in its proper place, completely intact. The pain was gone too, except for an elbow slightly bruised in the fall. But that was nothing compared to what I'd just experienced. Quickly rubbing my watering eyes, I looked around. The outlines of a standard luxury hotel room gradually emerged around me, shrouded in the darkness of a short southern night. The illuminated clock read 3:30 in the morning. Dawn would break soon. Phew. Breathing heavily, I sat right there on the floor, leaning back against the luxurious love nest I'd just tumbled out of like a clumsy cuckoo chick. I didn't have the strength to stand yet. Sweat literally poured off me, thoroughly soaking the rumpled sheets and even the carpet, as if I'd been a mouse that just escaped from a hungry cat's jaws. And this with the air conditioner running full blast, doing its best to turn my room into a refrigerator. Judging by the goosebumps running over my wet body, the settings were on the lowest temperature. Who the hell cranked it down like that? Besides the rumpled bedding on the enormous bed, I discovered a couple of girls pressed tightly together seeking warmth. Their clothes were scattered picturesquely around the room, and the naked poor things were freezing in the artificial cold, having shamelessly pulled all the blankets over themselves. To hell with it. Right now, I was just grateful for the cool air. Steam practically billowed from my mouth, but I kept sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Was it asthma? I'd never suffered from anything like that before. In the half-light, I fumbled on the nightstand for an opened bottle of water and drained it in 3 gulps. The life-giving liquid rolled like an icy wave down my overheated esophagus and stomach, making me nearly choke. But overall, my body reacted extremely positively to the fluid. My heart gradually began to calm down, and my constricted throat started letting in more air. Must have had a panic attack. God, what wild contrasts the mind can dream up. Maybe I'd gotten so cold that my subconscious decided to warm up my chilled body this way, and get the blood flowing through my veins while it was at it. Sounds logical. But what's with the amputation? I didn't seem to have slept on my arm, judging by the lack of tingling. Once more, for reassurance, I brought it right up to my face and confirmed it was fine. An ordinary arm, reasonably sinewy, with defined muscles from regular gym visits. Finally, I clenched and unclenched my fist a couple of times, noting the long, musical fingers and neat manicure. As the great Alexander Sergeyevich said, one can be a worthy man and care about one's nails. True, manicure salons probably didn't exist in his time, but that's beside the point. I'm sure even then there were specially trained people who beautified others. After all, that's what economy is all about. With these comforting thoughts, I somehow got up from the floor, leaning on the tall headboard. Enough sitting. I desperately wanted something to drink, preferably an entire cistern in one gulp. Throwing a robe over my chilled shoulders, I shuffled toward the minibar. All I could see in the immediate vicinity were empty bottles. The naked nymphs had been thirsty too and had downed everything they could reach. Should I kick them out? Ah, to hell with it. Let them lie there quietly. My skull was already about to split at the seams, and now they'd start screaming. As if eavesdropping on my thoughts, one of the girls raised her tousled head and asked sleepily, "Everything okay? You were screaming in your sleep." "Shut up and sleep," I advised her, opening the chrome minibar door. The girl didn't even blink, quickly snuggling back against her friend. Where did I pick them up yesterday? And where was I even wandering around? I couldn't remember anything coherent, just a colorful jumble in my memory, like someone had randomly shuffled a bunch of blurry photos without even bothering to label them. No, I definitely need to quit the partying. It won't lead to anything good. Despite its modest size, the bar could easily get a whole party drunk, but I chose another bottle of electrolyte water. To hell with alcohol, and the club's supplements too. I had no desire to continue the extended party, already having all kinds of orange nightmares. The last thing I needed was to catch the notorious DTs and end up in a specialized treatment facility. One acquaintance of mine goes to sanatoriums every 6 months, and he doesn't look particularly happy. Another one's dead already. Not great statistics. I decided to clear my nightmare-fogged head on the balcony, turning off the flickering plasma screen on the wall along the way. Another question. Who the hell turned it on and why? I make it a point never to watch the idiot box, not even in passing. What if I see my father's polished face on there? That would ruin my mood guaranteed. And that's if it only lasted one day. We have a strange relationship. He supposedly does everything, so I'll never want for anything, while simultaneously despising me to the core. The feeling's mutual, though, so we've long tried to distance ourselves from each other as much as possible. I can't even remember how many years we haven't spoken. 5, 6. Speaking of years. Near the darkened screen, I picked up a smartphone lying on the floor and confirmed that today was indeed July 19th. My birthday had snuck up quietly amid all the hustle and bustle. I'd decided to relax properly for once and overdid it just a bit. It happens. I'm an enthusiastic person. After the overcooled room, it was stuffy outside at first, but then a fresh breeze hit my face and I felt a bit better. Nearby waves noisily rolled onto the dark strip of shore. My balcony naturally had a sea view, but proper nighttime lighting was completely absent here, except for rare lampposts on the wide promenade. And they call this a world-class resort? Cringe. Pure cringe. If it weren't for the new racetrack in town where Formula One races and simpler ones used to be held, nothing could have lured me here. I should be grateful I've only been stuck here 3 weeks. With each passing year, I have less and less desire to visit Mother Russia. Too many unpleasant memories associated with it. A quick visit, some racing in sports cars, that's the maximum I can handle these days. Only Zhorasilayev's crash kept me stuck here much longer than planned. And while I feel a bit sorry for his collectible Lambo, waiting for that idiot to be discharged from the hospital proved simply unbearable. Now I'm even having nightmares from the stress. The terrible dream gradually evaporated from my head, leaving me alone with melancholy thoughts that had been occurring more and more frequently lately. So I've turned 25. Hypothetically, a third of my allotted time is already behind me. But who am I kidding? Half, if I'm lucky. With my lifestyle, I'll burn out much faster, and there's nothing to be done about it. And honestly, I don't really want to do anything about it. Death doesn't particularly scare me. It's only feared by those who didn't accomplish something or who have something to lose. But I'm not attached to anything and don't treasure anything. Not even myself. I have everything and simultaneously nothing. I can't call a single person truly close. Even if I climb over this balcony right now and take a flight from the 19th floor, not a single soul in the entire world would feel the slightest regret. Some rich fool fell to his death drunk, it happens. Unfortunately, the only person who had genuine feelings for me has long been gone. Mom, why did you leave so early? All that damn money couldn't save you. As if someone upstairs suddenly decided to remind our family that we're just as mortal as everyone else. Father shut down completely after that, and all I was left with was the passion for reading you instilled in me. And it causes far more problems than you can imagine. Maybe if I were the same thick-skulled life-waster as everyone else, it would be much easier to deal with all this shit. The vast majority of people in my circle don't have such difficulties. Or brains. But that's actually for the better. They don't ask questions, don't try to figure themselves out. They just exist. Yes, like dumb caterpillars eating leaves from morning to evening. But isn't that happiness? We'll never become butterflies anyway. We're constantly searching for new sensations that inevitably lead to the grave. Someone crashes into a wall at insane speed. The wall doesn't care how many zeros are in your account. Someone wastes away from drugs and other garbage. And someone like me gradually goes mad from realizing their own worthlessness. No, things used to be simpler somehow. The world seemed more positive. After all, it lay at my feet. All of it. At 20, I was deeply shocked when hearing that someone from our crowd had decided to end their life. Now I'm starting to understand them. Maybe at 30 I'll have no choice but to... Suddenly the smartphone in my robe pocket came to life, chirping briefly with a trendy song, just as meaningless as the previous ones. All the same tunes and the lyrics. No, it's better not to listen to them to avoid unnecessary questions about human evolution. Another downside of reading. My damn critical thinking that won't let me just stupidly enjoy life. And then it suddenly dawned on me that I'd been sitting on the ornate railing for quite a while, dangling my bare feet in the air. One careless movement and they'd definitely write about me in morning blog posts across the entire blogosphere. But somehow I didn't want to climb back onto the safe balcony floor. Instead, I just pulled out my phone, which had already gone silent but was still glowing. Right, a message in the private chat. I still haven't fixed the settings. Too lazy. Let's see who dared to bother me at this hour. Could someone actually remember my birthday? As it turned out, no. My trusted associate had written, the one I'd tasked with finding a rare item. He'd succeeded, but the sellers were asking 300 grand. Obviously not rubles. For most residents of the country, and neighboring ones too, that's an impossible sum. But I can easily afford such expenses. No matter how much I spend, I never seem to have less money. Dad works day and night to ensure that. He'd have enough even for great-great-grandchildren if he had any. But he wasn't planning to stop and continued fighting greedily for his share alongside numerous competitors. Apparently the passion for making money is the only thing that brings him any pleasure in life. Also a kind of drug, when you think about it. After confirming the transaction, I involuntarily smirked. Let this be my contribution to Mongolian science. I'm sure their entire budget is much smaller, and today they're supposed to deliver my long-awaited purchase. Not just another trinket, but a genuine archaeological treasure. A jade disc, about 30 centimeters in diameter, with a round hole right in the middle. Such things are still found in China and neighboring countries at ancient noble burial sites. They're dated approximately to the 3rd-5th millennium BC, which is impressive in itself. Contemporaries of the pyramids, basically. Honestly, until recently I had no idea these fascinating things existed, and I probably never would have known if Maria Ksandinova hadn't appeared on the horizon, a Greek by heritage, living in Krasnaya Poliana, which over several years had transformed from a god-forsaken backwater into a genuine ski resort. Not the most respectable one, but still. Personally, I wasn't attracted to sliding down slopes on boards, and I'd only been there once before with a noisy crowd. Now I had to visit regularly, like going to work. Almost funny. What's the connection between a 19-year-old girl and ancient artifacts of the past, you ask? The most direct connection. The thing is, the Society of the Stranded, as we dubbed ourselves, desperately needed some entertainment to keep from losing our minds from forced idleness. The racing track was temporarily closed after the incident with Zhora, and tearing through the local streets even at night risked hospitalization for much longer than a couple of weeks. And while we could still work things out with local cops, the numerous trucks roaming the city exclusively at night were completely beyond control. They drove like maniacs too, actively pushing street racers onto legal venues. So actively that some couldn't make it there under their own power anymore. The death toll set new records season after season. A mess? Of course, but it's a mess everywhere here. Seeing how long and persistently the doctors had to piece Zora back together, I completely lost any desire to play tag with freight trucks. So we returned to our favorite pastime under the codename cherry crushing. The idea wasn't new. Such cavalier behavior was popular even in czarist times. A girl of virtuous character would be chosen, necessarily a virgin, and the participants would hit on her one by one. Whoever managed to seduce the target won. In our case, the winner decided where we'd go after thoroughly detested Sochi. There was no question of monetary prizes. Our pocket money alone could buy a small country in Africa. This was about prestige, which was far more valuable. Everyone wanted to show up the rest, so the competition was fierce, and our preferences varied greatly. I really wanted to dash off to my favorite tropical islands, away from people and all the fuss, so I approached the conquest fully armed. This time the girl was quite something, thanks to the private firm for selecting such a bright candidate. A beauty, an athlete, an activist, and possessor of a strong character. A very difficult hunting target. I couldn't even bring myself to just call her Masha, Maria, and that's that. The first 3 participants crashed out pretty quickly. Rafik and Nail stupidly decided to hit on her, relying on expensive cars and signature charm. Alas, Maria appreciated neither. Her family wasn't hurting for money. Her father owned a private hotel, and the girl's demands were laughably modest. The scourge of club prudes, Seryoja Belkin, lasted a bit longer, but was undone by faith in his own irresistibility. Though before this, his angelic appearance had worked on the fairer sex without fail. If his family hadn't latched onto the gas pipeline back in the day, Seryoja could have had a successful modeling career. Various magazines and websites frequently approached him with offers, but he participated in shoots more out of boredom than for any earnings. The 4th participant was me, Alexey Ryumin, known among the elite as the bookworm. Not that I walked around everywhere with a volume of Brodsky in hand or quoted Shakespeare out of place. It's just that my horizons are noticeably broader than the others. And when it comes to intellectual humiliation, I have virtually no equals. Though over the years I'm increasingly convinced that there's great blessing in ignorance. Not for nothing did Griboyedov ages ago express this thought in his immortal Woe from Wit. Moths live only a few days, but it doesn't particularly bother them. They enjoy life and don't think about tomorrow, even when they burn in the flame they sought so long. Looking at the society that produced me, I saw exactly that principle of thinking, everywhere. Maria generally agreed with my reflections. I ambushed the defiant girl at one of her public events and shamelessly dumped everything weighing on my soul onto her. The girl simply wasn't prepared for such emotional pressure, and she didn't have the spirit to tell me to fuck off. All because I was the only one who bothered to study her psychological profile that private detectives had compiled. No, everyone else was more interested in photos, preferably undressed ones. Naive idiots. What can you do? Like all people, the outwardly steadfast Maria had her weakness, Mother Teresa syndrome. The thing is, her older brother had suffered a serious birth injury and grew up disabled, so she'd nursed him her whole life, and simultaneously had a soft spot for others crippled in body or soul. I didn't even really have to pretend to win her trust. Actually, I didn't have to at all. And the final chord was supposed to be that very jade disc for 300 grand. God save Mongolia. I hope they don't launch a cultural revolution there in celebration. Her beloved brother, the Greek Amazon's favorite, can't be cured, even with very serious financial investments. Again, to the question of money's real value. Modern medicine can only manage symptoms so the patient can at least move around somewhat, rather than lie there a helpless piece of meat. On the other hand, that would be too easy a solution. Pay for treatment in exchange for her virginity. More like some kind of business deal, and that's completely uninteresting to me. Still, poor Kostyuk Sandanov was the cherished key to my victory. Though the guy had seriously damaged his central nervous system, he wasn't a degenerate. Quite the opposite. His helpless physical shell had served as a powerful impetus for intellectual development. So now the young man was studying for his doctorate on completely legitimate grounds. Remotely, of course, but in our age of advanced technology that doesn't pose difficulties. Now even lectures are conducted online, and it doesn't surprise anyone, as long as the diploma isn't fake. Maria was also actively hitting the books, but had only finished her second year, and while her choice fell on the social sciences and humanities, her brother preferred rigorous history. He was the one who told me about the discs with the funny name Bi, as well as his revolutionary hypothesis that these artifacts of the past were in use even here in the Caucasus, thousands of kilometers from the nearest find. Supposedly the Great Silk Road passed through there, but much later. The guy had found a similar image in photographs of one of the recently discovered caves and wanted to verify it in person. True, he was hindered not only by his own disability, but also by the absence of even a basic replica of the disc. I generally liked Kostya's idea, and I decided to help him out a little. 300 grand worth, yeah, and at the same time, finally melt his unapproachable sister's heart. Fortunately, those very caves were located in the middle of nowhere, in the Caucasus Nature Reserve, and we were supposed to spend the night in a secluded guest house on the mountain slopes. Ah, romance. I'd worked all this out the day before that very party that nearly knocked out my last brain cells. Clearing my head a bit in nature definitely wouldn't hurt. Otherwise, I'm having all kinds of desert dreams, and definitely not in the hospitable Emirates. If everything goes well, by tonight the grateful Maria will help me win the bet. Isn't that the best birthday present? Chapter 2. They found these caves completely by accident, our driver continued, having taken on the role of guide as well. When they were building the bypass road to Arches, there's a landslide-prone section, and during one of the slides, a cavity in the rock was exposed. The engineers immediately realized it was man-made, and then we showed up with specialists. Naturally, transporting expensive guests was entrusted to one of the reserve's most experienced workers, and judging by his budget-tuned patrol, he frequently moonlighted as a jeeping guide, meaning he drove wealthy tourists and other influential types like us through the mountains. The long vehicle barely shook over the numerous potholes, so the ride could sometimes even be called comfortable. This wasn't like those infamous UAZs that everyone and their grandmother drove around here. In those things, like in a bartender's shaker, all your internal organs would instantly get mixed up from the wild rattling. Today absolutely had to go off without incident, which I made unmistakably clear to the driver right after our handshake. Sasha, he introduced himself briefly. Alexey, I replied, refusing to mangle my own name. The colloquial Lyosha, and especially Lyoka, genuinely made me cringe. It immediately conjured images of some village slob or back-alley thug, so everyone around me used the full version or shortened it to the respectable Alex. Besides, that's exactly what appeared on all my European documents. The worker turned out to be fairly young, no older than 30, with barely perceptible Eastern features and a neat goatee that made him look like a distant descendant of the Mongol Tatars. His light blue eyes held a sly squint, without any cloying servility. You could tell right away he was his own man, which made finding common ground with him that much easier. I listened knowingly to the engine's sound, praised the nice upgrades, then transferred a 5-figure sum to the guy's personal account, very close to 6 figures, for further improvements to the vehicle, so to speak. Sasha bloomed like a cherry tree on Chinese fertilizers and promised to do everything perfectly, as if there was any doubt. If there was one thing I was good at in this life, it was finding an approach to people. Tell me, Alexander, As a State Reserve employee, doesn't this attitude toward nature bother you? Maria asked provocatively. They're building a road right through your lands. Usually the girl managed to restrain herself somewhat when dealing with strangers, but occasionally her inner activist burst through. Maybe with age she'd learn better self-control, but right now youthful maximalism just poured out of her. I used to be the same way, and had trained myself with great difficulty to smooth over sharp corners and to ignore the blunt ones. Of course we're not thrilled about all this mess, Sasha answered honestly. But you're right. We're a state institution, and you can't really fight the state's will. Outrageous! My companion's dark eyes flashed. Alex, what do you think? If only you knew, dear, how little I care, you'd burst into tears. Out loud, I said something completely different. This city needs the bypass road, just like it needs ski runs. Otherwise it'll remain a backwater, just an expensive one. The real question is how exactly the work gets done. Abroad, when they build something, they always do it with consideration for environmentalists and other green types. Here they only look at how much they can steal from the project. And that doesn't piss you off? I prefer doing something concrete rather than uselessly flapping my gums. But Alex is right, her brother interrupted. Fighting your own government is like battling windmills. No strikes or petitions will lead anywhere. What's needed is strict oversight, period. Constantine was handling the trip worse than anyone, so he deserved special thanks for the timely support. He'd been periodically nauseous on the road, and between bouts the budding historian kept sipping water and swallowing anti-nausea pills, but he still looked like the happiest person on earth. You could understand the kid. This was his first real scientific expedition, not just joyrides along mountain switchbacks. While the proud daughter of Hellas demonstratively sulked at the men conspiring against her, the vehicle managed to crest another rocky ledge and rolled along a rutted track beside a peak that rose sheer into the heavens. At the top, as if to spite the calendar, porous snow glinted, and many neighboring mountains boasted white caps. The view from here was stunning, with only the clouds rushing in from all sides spoiling the panorama. It felt strange looking down at them from above, not from an airplane window. Beautiful. What altitude are we at now? About 2,500 meters, Sasha answered without hesitation. Almost there. If breathing gets difficult, speak up. Don't be shy. My chest did tighten slightly, but I didn't experience any real discomfort until we stopped. My ear got plugged for a bit, so the mint gum I'd brought proved quite handy. I'd brought a lot with me, actually, almost a full trunk's worth. A night at the camp lay ahead, outfitted no worse than alpine chalets, and much depended on my foresight. You can't exactly send someone to the nearest supermarket. Eventually, we stopped in the middle of a small platform that resembled a ledge hanging over an abyss, from which a trail descended that was visible to the naked eye. Considering that nothing but solid rock surrounded us, people walked here often. I gladly stretched my stiff legs, simultaneously checking how the soles of my brand-new hiking boots held up. It would be seriously unfun if I twisted my ankle and had to call a helicopter. As for Maria, there was no need to worry. The girl bounced springily out of the cabin and was now stretching energetically, not forgetting her flexibility routine. She'd climbed all the nearby mountains up and down, so her level of preparation hardly fell short of any instructor. As for Kostya, mobile stretchers and two bearers awaited him, having followed us in a vintage Gaz 69. The very one affectionately nicknamed the Little Goat for its unprecedented cross-country ability in those times. I absolutely didn't want to take risks, so I'd convinced the guy that trying to walk on his own wasn't the best idea. He could only move across level surfaces with crutches, and here even a healthy person could easily break their neck. So only the stretcher. Buddy, no offense. I didn't need any incidents. The sweetener was a protective case containing that very buy disc. As soon as I opened it slightly on the Nissan's hood, ostensibly to check the contents, the young scholar nearly soared to the heavens with joy. Fortunately, they weren't so far from here. Watching her brother floating in the clouds, Maria herself noticeably brightened. In her fleeting glance swam so much gratitude that for a second I felt uneasy from the wave of melancholy. Everything would definitely end tonight, and this seemingly tough nut would be cracked and left to her own devices. No interest whatsoever. Overcoming the descending gloom took considerable effort. I had to briefly close my eyes and remind myself why I'd climbed up here. Winning the bet was merely a means to finally get to my beloved islands amidst the calming ocean. Maybe there I'd feel at least a bit better. Otherwise, I'd soon end up in all the morning news. My struggle with another episode didn't escape Sasha's attentive gaze, and he immediately pestered me with questions. Dizzy? Nauseous? It's nothing. Everything's fine now, I reassured him, handing over the precious case. Let's head up already, shall we? I'm dying to see this mysterious cave of yours. More like a tunnel, one of the bearers muttered quietly under his breath. And he turned out to be damn right, because nature definitely couldn't have created such a thing. But first we had to wind our way along a trail that alternated with wooden walkways. And for extra convenience, a rope was strung along the entire route. From here you could see how part of the crumbly black rock had slid somewhere below, exposing the stone ribs of ancient layers. The road itself went in a completely different direction, and its existence was only indicated by the unfinished supports of a future bridge far below. Beneath them were even more black hills, but they didn't look like earthen mounds at all. More like coal, which gleamed dully in the sun. That's shale argillite, the erudite Constantine decided to enlighten me, swaying in his modern palanquin. If you wet it, the slip coefficient is higher than clay. These are sedimentary rocks, or more precisely, fossilized silt. Apparently the builders disrupted an underground watercourse, which caused the landslide. Where would silt come from here? I spread my arms demonstratively, as if trying to encompass the entire Caucasus range. There used to be an ancient ocean here, the guy eagerly explained, as if he'd been waiting for this question. And all these mountains were underwater cliffs. But then, quite recently by geological standards, they rose sharply upward. Recently meaning a couple million years ago? I smirked. No, only a few 100,000. For us humans, that's still a very long time, but for nature it happened literally yesterday. Even the beaches haven't had time to properly form yet. Oh yes, I exclaimed, remembering the local coastline. I was always amazed why there's nothing but pebbles here instead of normal sand. So it just hasn't had time to grind down yet? Exactly. And the mountains are still gradually rising, pushing the sea line back. I hope they'll take a little break today. Kostya proved himself a good guy again. The gray melancholy retreated, and the world around filled with at least some colors. I probably hadn't wasted 300 grand on the guy. I'd leave him the disc as a memento. No point returning it to Mongolian resellers, really. At least someone should have a good memory of me. The descent turned out quite lengthy because we constantly had to move in zigzags. But only birds or suicides could afford the direct route. Somewhere far below sparkled the blue thread of a mountain river squeezed between rocky outcrops, but from here it was several hundred meters down. I'd never experienced fear of heights, but one glance into the neighboring abyss made my legs go slightly weak. That's good. Means I'm still clinging to this useless life. From here, the landslide itself was clearly visible, having taken up part of the foothill as a shapeless black pile. The relentless water had carved itself a path through the loose rock, but beyond it the color resembled more a cocktail with some whiskey in it. But I only spotted the cave entrance when I stood directly opposite it, and it was impressive. The whole thing looked like an oval gap in a massive stone slab. The edges of the arch were indeed too smooth, though I could barely imagine what ancient people could have gouged them with, not knowing iron or other hard alloys. And that's not counting the nearly vertical slope. Wow, just like our dolmens, Kostya marveled. Yeah, except there a child could barely squeeze through, I noted. But here it's at least 3 meters across. 2.5, Sasha corrected. UNESCO specialists came recently, took measurements. They want to add the complex to their registry. Good idea, Kostya nodded. Otherwise they'll start bringing tourists, and they'll tear everything up here. I didn't remind him that we were tourists too, and not even the first ones who'd managed to get here recently. For instance, on the inner side of the stone arch, some incomprehensible numbers were drawn in black marker, approximately at human eye level. At least it wasn't the proverbial Vasya from Uryupinsk was here. That was something to be grateful for. Beyond the entrance, Darkness gradually thickened, but we had bright flashlights integrated right into construction helmets. There was no other way to enter caves, so I had to sacrifice my hairstyle to science. I'd never worn my hair short, but I didn't like long locks either. Sasha carefully tightened all the fastenings so the helmet wouldn't slip askew from a sudden movement, but I had no intention of protesting. Safety above all. We had to walk along that same narrow plank platform, not touching the floor strewn with small stones. Here and there, wooden U-shaped supports were visible, but their effectiveness was hard to believe. "This is so nothing hits you on the head from above," Sasha explained again. "Don't leave the path. Stay together. Clear?" "Yes, sir, Commander," Maria saluted irritably. Even the ridiculous orange helmet didn't ruin the girl's looks, and she'd dressed so well that even the bearers were drooling. Fitted pants, a tailored jacket, and underneath, a sports top emphasizing the serious assets of the young activist. About a C-cup, no less. We weren't planning any rock climbing, so this outfit was perfectly suitable for outdoor walks. I hadn't dressed up particularly either, but Sasha, in addition to the helmet, had put on a vest with multiple pockets and flaps stuffed with all kinds of useful goods. It vaguely resembled military tactical gear. The camouflaged guys stayed outside with the stretcher, and the four of us delved deeper into the man-made cave. Though that's overstating it. After just 20-some meters, the passage was blocked by a collapse of enormous boulders that we were strictly forbidden to approach. How deep the tunnel went, no one could say yet. Fortunately, the goal of our expedition was located just before the collapse. Once we passed the smooth-as-an-egg antechamber, all sorts of bas-reliefs began appearing on the walls, executed with a decent level of craftsmanship. In some images you could clearly make out people and animals, but most represented stoned-out abstraction. Complex interweaving of geometric figures, some rings and longitudinal lines, and some even resembled strange mechanisms in cross-section. I paused at one composition depicting something like a spider with raised legs, and admired the detail and workmanship. The bas-relief even had articulated folds drawn in, like in the most ancient Egyptian temples. Only there were no familiar hieroglyphs, just incomprehensible sticks and squiggles. Ancestors of modern hieroglyphs, maybe? I was distracted from further contemplation of this imprint from past epochs by bright flashes that painfully cut into my eyes. The delighted Maria was shooting away on a stylish iPhone, while her brother used a more or less professional DSLR. But I had no need to take memorial photos. If I want to see this again, I'll come back here. I don't like photographing in general, because snapshots have no life. You can't touch them or feel them in any way, and for ordinary memories my own memory works just fine. Fortunately, I can't complain about it. So before the Zandanovs completely burned out my retinas, I hurried to put on protective glasses. The experienced Sasha had been sporting light filters from the start and kept his eyes on all three of us. Though where could we go? The stone around us wasn't uniform, but all the joints were neatly covered with something lighter. Mortar, maybe? Or that famous ancient mixture with raw eggs? In any case, this work of human hands had stood for an incredibly long time, almost unscathed by merciless time. Only a few bas-reliefs had completely crumbled, and one seemed deliberately scraped off. Or maybe they just chose the wrong material. Not all stones are equally durable. But jade in hardness is quite comparable to steel or granite. I specifically looked into it when learning about the mysterious discs. No wonder these artifacts survived after so many thousands of years. Another question is how they managed to make them then without modern technology. I didn't particularly believe in aliens, so my imagination immediately drew up a huge manufactory where industrious Chinese polished the intractable rock from night till morning until they lost their professional capacity from old age, after which their descendants picked up the baton, and so on. Labor-intensive? Certainly. But who cared about that in those wild times? It's quite possible that this very disc passed through several generations of masters before taking its final form. The ornate ornamentation didn't evoke any associations, but looked mysterious and beautiful. Sasha carefully opened the case and pulled out the 30-centimeter plate to the admiring gazes of the Zandanovs. Now, in the cave's semi-darkness, This action looked like some kind of ritual. "Right here," Kostya whispered quietly, pointing at one of the walls. Out of curiosity, I came closer and saw a ring-shaped recess with a cylindrical protrusion in the middle at that spot. And here was the altar itself, or whatever it's called scientifically. This section of the bas-relief differed drastically from the rest, as if it had been deliberately inserted here. Too perfect a rectangle of dense, dark brown stone with sparkling flecks. Nothing else like it appeared anywhere. Granite, maybe? In any case, it was polished to the state of a sports car's hood. I ran my finger along the decorated block but didn't feel even the slightest roughness. Perfectly smooth surface like cast metal. And also, unexpectedly warm, though in the cave itself it was chilly. For comparison, I touched neighboring sections, and there the stone distinctly chilled the skin. Strange. Sasha treated my groping with understanding, though it directly violated all his instructions. After all, he himself went even further, egged on by Kostya, and tried to insert the disc into the recess, which worked without any particular problems. Even when the ancient artifact had just left the case, I already knew it would fit there like it belonged. I've always had perfect spatial judgment, so I didn't gasp in amazement when the jade plate settled precisely into the ring-shaped groove, as if it had always been there. Sasha carefully removed his hands and stepped aside, allowing the audience to admire the resulting installation. The joyful Zandanovs immediately started clicking away with flashes, making me turn away briefly. But fortunately, the torture of my eyes soon ended. "Alex, do you even realize what this means?" Kostya asked enthusiastically, nearly dancing on his crutches. "No, but I assume you'll explain everything to me now. This is a real discovery, with a capital D. They'll all die when they hear about this. It tears the entire classical scheme to shreds." "Poor Chinese. Worked overtime here too," I muttered, examining the composition. It was obvious from the start that the same masters worked here. Even the ornament on the disc partially matches. "But I think it needs to be turned a little," Maria said, tilting her head to the side. "Maybe," her brother agreed. "Try rotating it." "Maybe I should?" Sasha offered with obvious tension in his voice. "This requires gentle female hands," I reassured him. "Looks fine to me as is, but let the young researchers play." "Look, now. No?" Maria easily turned the disc, but the result didn't satisfy her again. Then she slowly rotated it back until the protrusions and depressions on the artifact precisely matched the ornamentation surrounding the recess. A unified design emerged, though still quite abstract. I couldn't grasp the meaning of all these interweavings, though they did remind me of something distant. Before we could express our admiration for the ancient master's work, the girl suddenly jerked her hand away from the stone. "Ow!" "What?" Sasha immediately jumped to her side. "It's burning," she complained, showing reddened fingertips. "Listen, it really is." The reserve worker prudently didn't touch the surface but simply waved his hand near it, and I felt a wave of heat on my own face, as if I'd looked into an open oven where signature pizza was being made right in front of you. Except we weren't currently in a family restaurant in Sicily. What the hell? I didn't manage to say anything more because the floor beneath us suddenly shuddered. Everything around cracked, and small stones merrily drummed on my helmet. An earthquake? What terrible timing. I jerked toward the exit, but my own legs suddenly buckled, as if after downing a bottle or two of booze. The cave spun like a crazed centrifuge, making my fairly strong vestibular system twist into a pretzel. My ears plugged up to sharp pain, literally pressing the eardrums into my skull. The only thing I managed to make out in this whirlwind was the stunned Maria plopping onto the floor next to me, silently gaping. Well, this isn't how I imagined our intimacy. When nausea rose right to my throat, something piercingly burst in my head, finally sending me into oblivion. My last thought was, no romance today for sure. And then I died. Or did I? The dead don't feel this shitty. Everything hurt, including places that shouldn't even be felt under normal circumstances. Every organ was breaking apart, every bone cracking with pain, and I wouldn't have budged for anything if blinding light hadn't seared my pupils. I had to raise my concrete-heavy arm to somehow hide my face. Alive? The sound barely reached my compressed consciousness through the loud ringing in my ears. All I could do was croak affirmatively. Yes. Good. Just rest. Excellent suggestion. I could definitely manage that. Sasha had the right priorities, checking on me first. I'd have to thank him properly when we got out of here. Went on a trip to commune with archaeology. The idiot wanted romance. Okay, cut the hysteria. The main thing is we weren't buried by rocks in this godforsaken cave, and we'll get out somehow. Just need to make one call and they'll demolish this lousy mountain to its foundation just to pull us out. Though something wasn't right. Colored spots with sparkles still danced before my eyes, but I was increasingly convinced that we weren't surrounded by rock at all. Sasha's flashlight darting around kept catching rusty frameworks that evoked no associations whatsoever, and beneath me weren't the platform's boards at all, but something rough and cold. To the touch, metal, apparently. I thrashed around on the floor with all my limbs like a cephalopod tossed on shore and soon managed to sit up. The pain was gradually subsiding, but my muscles remained unusually sluggish, and the nausea hadn't gone anywhere. I hadn't had such a terrible hangover in ages, but why now? Judging by my wet and stinking jacket, I'd been turned inside out, though I had no memory of that moment. Good thing I didn't choke like a complete junkie. That would have been an unfortunate death. My flashlight had somehow turned off, but I quickly brought it back to working order by flicking the switch back and forth. The bright cone finally convinced me we weren't in a cave. All around was nothing but metal, without a hint of any exit. The low-ceilinged room was cluttered with all sorts of incomprehensible contraptions that you were afraid to touch. They'd probably crumble to rusty dust. The walls and floor were also metal, as if we'd been transported to some ancient garage. Nearby, covered in black reddish dust, Sasha was trying to revive the Zandanovs, who were sluggishly stirring on the floor. They looked like victims of an extended party, so I wasn't feeling bad alone. That was somewhat comforting, though it brought no clarity. I was completely losing track of what was happening. "Where are we?" I rasped, clearing my throat. "Some kind of warehouse, I think," the reserve worker answered uncertainly. "But I've never seen equipment like this." He deliberately turned his head, illuminating a strange structure resembling an ancient computer. From the era when they were called mainframes and occupied entire buildings, all angular and monumental, with a small convex screen in the middle and a bunch of massive buttons, like in old 1930s elevators you still find in some places on Manhattan. The protective casing had long since rotted away, and through the gaps you could clearly see thick cable bundles and some dark circuit boards. The other contraptions looked no better, and one was just a pile of spare parts in a frame that had crumbled to pieces. This wasn't a warehouse, but some ancient dump. Every careless movement raised acrid dust into the air that immediately made you want to cough up your own lungs. It seemed no one had looked in here for a very long time. All the more surprising to find ourselves here. What if this was a kidnapping, and we didn't just pass out, but from some nerve agent sprayed in the cave? And then we were stuffed into some military bunker from Kolchak's time, so no living soul could find me here. But why grab the others for company? No ransom from them, just dead weight. At least this partially explained why the phone and watch couldn't find a signal no matter how much I tormented them. But the theory still seemed pulled from thin air. Why didn't they strip us of all our gadgets just in case? Why leave us unguarded? And what if I'd simply croaked from the mysterious chemical? Meanwhile, the Zandanovs were also gradually coming to, with the same symptoms. Maria handled the weakness much better, but Kostya was genuinely miserable. So much so that he developed a nosebleed. Sasha did what he could to ease his suffering, pulling tissues and other medical stuff from his hunting vest. Good man, well prepared. While the guys fussed over the young archaeologist, I decided to examine the room and figure out how to get out of here faster. It couldn't boast large dimensions, so even with a shuffling gait I managed to walk along the walls in a couple of minutes. Among interesting finds was an altar exactly like the one with the disc recess, only carved from darker stone. Almost black with a pronounced gloss, like obsidian. Amidst the kingdom of metal it looked somewhat foreign, though it was surrounded by all sorts of strange gadgets. Some clearly served as mounts, framing the cubic stone from all sides, but everything else remained an incomprehensible heap of technology. One thing could be said with absolute certainty. The mineral hadn't been dragged here with us from the cave. It had been gathering dust here for a very long time. This finding seriously shook the kidnapping theory, and it completely collapsed when I stumbled upon a door. Just as rusty as everything around it, only instead of a handle it had a rotating wheel, like on a submarine. The guys and I had once traveled in a private sub along the Mediterranean seabed, and there were very similar locking mechanisms there. They probably exist in bunkers too, but judging by the door's appearance, no one had touched it. Not in this century for sure. An emergency exit? Then where's the main door? I made another circuit along the walls and returned to the rust-covered wheel. I couldn't find any other openings, except for a small grate on the ceiling. By all accounts it was ventilation, but this technological opening wouldn't work for us. Even slender Maria wouldn't fit through. Sasha came to similar conclusions, having finished playing medic. He repeated my route exactly, but didn't spend long contemplating the door, immediately grabbing the wheel. "We need to hurry," he explained, puffing from exertion. "No telling what the air situation is here." Hard to argue with that statement. If the ventilation was clogged, we wouldn't last long in a sealed room. We needed to find the real entrance through which our unconscious bodies got here. I joined in rocking the wheel without any special invitation, but it held fast. The old rust worked as well as welding. For a full minute, we unsuccessfully jerked the wheel until Sasha slapped his dirty hand to his forehead and pulled a can of universal WD-40 lubricant from his vest. That one, blue and yellow, familiar to many car enthusiasts. Even I, with all my detachment from the technical side of racing, knew it well. That's what it means to be prepared. Of course, a gas cutter or at worst an angle grinder would be more useful right now, but this wasn't bad at all. Sasha thoroughly sprayed all the joints he could reach with the plastic straw, after which we just had to wait. Oh, and answer questions from the bewildered Zandanovs, who had also dragged themselves to the door. Kostya still felt terrible, but his sister nearly pecked our brains out, asking the same thing dozens of times. Claustrophobia must have kicked in. "We know no more than you." I finally couldn't handle the verbal diarrhea. "If you want to get out of here, better pray that the lubricant can overcome the corrosion, otherwise we might suffocate here." Shouldn't have blurted that out, I'll admit. The girl with bulging eyes immediately grabbed the wheel and began convulsively jerking it. And strangely enough, she had much better luck than us. The wheel screeched and turned slightly, literally a few degrees. "It's moving!" Sasha joyfully shouted. "Come on, all together, on the count of 3!" Even though the rust had lost its grip, it wasn't letting us go easily. The 3 of us had to puff for another 10 minutes trying to make one full rotation. We constantly had to unscrew it back to build momentum and let the lubricant spread over a larger area. Somewhere in faraway California, the creator or at least the exporter of this wonderful miracle liquid must have been hiccuping repeatedly. And a second turn wasn't even necessary. The mechanism finally came to its senses, and we managed to push the thick door slightly away from the frame. At first, even a finger wouldn't fit in the narrow crack, but fresh sea air with a taste of salt burst inside through it, instantly giving us strength. Somewhere outside, waves were distinctly roaring, so freedom was within arm's reach. Sasha managed to reach the hinges with the spray nozzle and drench them abundantly with lubricant. Now waiting wasn't so tedious, though the signal still refused to catch. Apparently we really did need to get outside. The others' gadgets also expressed general solidarity with mine, though the guys' models were much simpler. "Maybe it's an old ship," Maria suggested, not peeling away from the crack. "Very unlikely," objected Kostya, sitting on the floor. "No list to speak of, and the equipment is somehow incomprehensible." "You saw the altar?" I asked bluntly. "Here?" "Where else?" I shrugged. "Almost the same as in the cave, just different pictograms." "I have to see it." The guy perked up. "Where is it?" "Cool it," Sasha cut him off. "First we'll push the door open. Heave!" And again coordinated work brought results. With a wild screech, the door gradually began to yield, widening the gap. True, it was gloomy outside, but that didn't bother us at all. We continued pushing the door forward with all our might, bracing our feet against the floor until it jammed tight again. But that didn't matter anymore, because the widened crack allowed us to somehow squeeze through outside. Though we had to remove our outer clothing along with helmets, then push each other out one by one. Sasha went last, passing us the precious vest. Nobody argued with that. Uncertainty awaited ahead, and the vest contained many useful things. Eventually, our tired but inspired foursome found ourselves in a short, semi-dark corridor that ended in a fenced balcony. Some railings had rusted so badly they'd bent under their own weight, so I had no desire to approach the very edge. A bit further, as far as the eye could see, waves lazily lapped, silvered by bright moonlight. Well, look at that. While we fought with the door, night had already fallen. Lighting the way with our flashlights, we carefully traversed the corridor that creaked in every key and emerged onto the platform. The balcony actually turned out to be a ramp that ran around the perimeter of the entire structure we'd just escaped from. From here to the water's surface was roughly 6 meters, and through gaps in the decking you could see supports extending downward. The waves beat against them, creating the noise. No, this definitely wasn't a ship, but some kind of platform. Most likely an old oil rig. But where would one come from in the Black Sea? My dreams of catching a signal remained unfulfilled, and then Sasha, who had fearlessly advanced along the ramp to the very corner, loudly cursed aloud. In his voice rang so much surprise mixed with hopelessness that I immediately tore myself away from the devices and hurried to him. Now that was truly 50 shades of Russian profanity. The reserve worker had never allowed himself such language in our presence before, so the situation was extraordinary. After just a few steps, I, in every sense, joined Sasha with his head thrown back, not the least bit embarrassed by the lady present. And she herself didn't particularly restrain her language when she joined us. Only Kostya maintained thoughtful silence, gazing at the night sky where 2 moons were shining.